The vast expanse of deep space stretched out before the dreadnoughts as they silently drifted through the void, the stars dim and distant, as if the universe itself were holding its breath. Every sensor on the ship remained cold and unblinking, the once mighty hum of the engines now replaced by an eerie stillness. The cloaking field was active. The ship no longer existed in the conventional sense. It was not there, not in any way the Zithari or any of their advanced systems could comprehend. It was as if the dreadnought had slipped through the cracks of reality itself. But it wasn't just that one ship. There were more, countless ships now in motion like shadows in a place too dark to fathom. The humans had learned to hide in ways that defied all expectations. That their technology was so advanced was almost a joke. No, it wasn't their tech that made them so dangerous. It was their ability to move beyond it, to adapt, to think, to push beyond what was thought possible. It was their minds that made them the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known. And it was this quality that had the Zithari so unsettled. No species had ever been able to hide from their scanners. And yet here was humanity slipping between the cracks of their vast knowledge, with nothing but willpower and cunning. When the first dreadnought emerged from its cloak, it was as if the very space around it had been peeled away, leaving only the silent edge of the unknown. But what the Zithari did not realize was that the first ship was just a scout. It had no intention of revealing its presence yet, but the sensors were already active. It could feel the ripples of 1,000 alien minds, searching it, probing it, daring to try and understand what could not be understood. And so the ship did what it had been built to do. It adapted. It became part of the silence again, and drifted unnoticed into the black abyss. The Zithari thought it was simply an anomaly, a glitch in their system, a fleeting moment that would soon pass. But the second ship did not pass unnoticed. The moment it entered their system, their scanners flashed with an intensity never before seen. There was a disturbance, a disruption that none of their experts could explain. And still no one could comprehend the significance of what they were witnessing. As the first ship moved deeper into Zithari space, the sense of unease spread among the ranks of the alien fleet. This was no longer a minor anomaly. This was something much greater. The Zithari commanders now ordered every ship to be on high alert, every sensor active, every calculation made with perfect precision. They were being watched, they were being tested, and the knowledge gnawed at their minds that they were not the ones in control, not anymore. The Zithari scout ship approached the dreadnought. With caution, its sleek design glided silently through space. As it neared the human warship, it flickered for a moment on the edge of the Zithari scanners, then disappeared entirely. The ship's captain, a seasoned veteran of countless campaigns, stared at the blinking screen in disbelief. Their best scanners should have detected the dreadnought from miles away. Yet there was nothing at all. The ship was not there. Or was it? No, it had to be there. It had to be, but it wasn't. The captain ordered another scan, a full diagnostic of their entire fleet's systems. Everything checked out perfectly. They had lost nothing, no malfunctions, no disruptions, yet the human ship was still invisible. It was as though the laws of physics themselves bent around it. They couldn't see it, they couldn't touch it, but it was there. The silence became deafening in the cockpit as the captain felt the cold sweat forming on the back of their neck. No one spoke. The crew could feel it too, a creeping sense of dread settling in their hearts, the feeling that they were no longer the hunters, but the hunted. The captain motioned to his first officer, who immediately ordered a closer approach. The ship would be in scanning range. Soon the human vessel could no longer hide from them. They were about to learn its secrets, or so they thought. The Zithari crew braced for the coming scan, their fingers hovering over weapon systems, ready to strike with lethal precision. But then something happened. The first officer's eyes widened. The captain's hand froze on the controls. They had tried to scan the dreadnought, but the ship's readings didn't just fail, they disintegrated. No, not disintegrated. They changed the data, twisted in real time. The crew could see it. All their instruments began to flicker with chaotic energy. Their scanners returned nothing but corrupted static. The ship seemed to dissolve before their eyes. A streak of light suddenly burned through the starfield. But the dreadnought was not there. No, it was still in the same spot, the same location. Yet the data was gone. It had no mass, no density. It couldn't be real, could it? This couldn't be happening. It was impossible. But it was happening. They could feel it in their bones. The ship was real. And it wasn't real at the same time. The captain ordered another scan, but the result was the same. The dreadnought remained hidden out of sight. Their systems offered nothing but fragmented pieces of data, all overlapping in strange patterns like a puzzle that couldn't be solved. Their confusion grew into panic. A second scan produced the same result, and then the third. The ship was gone. The crew watched in disbelief as their instruments flickered and crackled. Nothing could be explained. It shouldn't be possible. A ship couldn't just disappear, not in space, not like this. And yet here it was in front of them, both present and absent in the same breath. A warning flashed across the commander's screen from a nearby fleet ship. They weren't alone. They weren't safe, not anymore. Back on the dreadnought, the human commander sat quietly in the war room. The ship's low hum was the only sound that filled the room. The monitors before him displayed a calm view of space, but his mind was already a battlefield. The Zithari fleet had been close. They had almost found them. But the ship had done its job, just as it had been designed to do. It had hidden in the darkness of space, bending light and sound around it. The scanners of the enemy fleet had flared to life, only to collapse in on themselves. The dreadnought had adapted before the Zithari even had a chance to comprehend what was happening. But this wasn't about the dreadnought. This was about humanity, the human mind. The dreadnoughts were only the vessels. They were the means, not the end. They were simply reflections of humanity's genius. Every battle, every strategy, every maneuver ever conceived by human hands had been imprinted into their systems. Every tactic ever used against their enemies was stored there, a database built from millennia of warfare, a mind that could outthink and outfight anything that came at it. Humanity had learned long ago that to survive was not enough. They had to dominate. They had to become smarter than their foes. That was the key. No alien race could ever predict the full scope of human creativity. When it came to war, they thought the dreadnoughts were nothing more than powerful warships advanced beyond their understanding. But they couldn't be more wrong. It wasn't the dreadnoughts that made humanity dangerous. It was the people who built them, the people who fought in them, the people who lived and died with them. Each human mind carried with it the knowledge of 1,000 years of war and innovation. And it was that knowledge that made the dreadnoughts unpredictable. No tactic was too old, no strategy too out of date. Everything could be used, everything could be adapted in real time against the most advanced enemies the galaxy had ever seen. The human commander's fingers hovered over the controls, and he studied the flickering map of the galaxy that stretched before him. There were more alien fleets out there, and they would come, but they would not be ready. They never would be. The humans had fought their way to the top of this galaxy, not with numbers or raw strength, but with their ingenuity, with their ability to learn and adapt. He knew it would not take long before the other species figured it out. They would see the pattern, the unpredictability that humanity thrived on. The Zithari were not the only ones who would come searching for the humans. There were others more powerful, more dangerous. And once they knew that the dreadnoughts could not be defeated in conventional ways, they would change their tactics and try something new. They would bring their greatest weapons, their deadliest technologies, and they would fail. It would be a mistake to underestimate humanity again. It always was. Every alien race that ever faced humanity had thought the same thing, that they were superior, that they had seen it all and knew how to fight and destroy any foe. But humanity was different. It had always been different. The commander's eyes narrowed. The Zithari were only the beginning. The true test was still to come. He knew it, but humanity was ready. They had already won the war before it had even begun. The dreadnoughts were a reflection of the human spirit, and that spirit could never be defeated, no matter the odds, no matter how great the enemy. It was in their nature to adapt and survive, and to fight when everyone else would have given up. The Zithari High Council gathered in the heart of their command ship, their minds sharp and their eyes hard with the weight of what they had just witnessed. The event had shaken them to their core. The data was clear. The dreadnought was no anomaly. It was not a malfunction nor a temporary glitch. It was something far worse, something they had never encountered before, and something that they could not ignore. They had tried everything, their finest scanners, their most advanced technologies. All had failed to pierce the dreadnought's veil. They had sent their elite strike force to capture the human vessel and study it, and now half of their fleet had been lost. The strike force was shattered, reduced to nothing more than scattered debris. Floating in space, the Zithari generals exchanged uneasy glances. They had seen the humans fight before, but never like this, never with this kind of mind-bending unpredictability. Their systems could not understand it. They had never been forced to think in such terms. No enemy had ever outsmarted them so completely. It wasn't just their warships that had proven dangerous, it was their ability to fight with a kind of chaotic brilliance. The humans didn't follow rules or patterns. They didn't play by any strategy the galaxy had ever known. And now that was their greatest weapon. Humanity was a wild card, a species that could never be predicted or contained, and the Zithari were beginning to understand the truth. They had underestimated humanity in ways they could never have imagined. The commander of the Zithari fleet stood before the council, his voice trembling slightly as he spoke. The humans are not like any species we have faced. Their ships are not the key, it is their minds. They have evolved to fight in ways that make no sense to us. They do not obey the laws of war as we know them. Their tactics are completely unpredictable. They have the ability to change everything in the blink of an eye. Their warships are not just ships, they are extensions of their will. They do not follow logic, they create it. The council fell into a heavy silence. Every Zithari face was etched with a mix of confusion and fear. They had long prided themselves on their superiority. They had believed their minds to be the sharpest, their technology the most advanced, but now they faced a species whose adaptability had shattered every belief they had ever held. The high leader of the Zithari slowly rose from his seat, his eyes fixed on the view of space beyond the command window, his mind racing with the implications of what he had just heard. The humans have shown us that intelligence alone is not enough. Their minds are a weapon, not just a tool. They have made war into something we cannot control. We have underestimated them for too long. We will have to change our tactics. We must rethink everything. The council murmured in agreement. But the truth was undeniable. The Zithari had no plan, no strategy that could defeat humanity. They would need something more, something new, something that could match the chaos of the dreadnoughts and the minds behind them. But what could they possibly do against an enemy who didn't even need to follow the rules of warfare to win? What could they do against a species that had already won simply by thinking differently? The Zithari fleet retreated into the shadows of their space stations. Their commanders were a mix of anger and fear. Their pride had been broken, and their once invincible strategy lay in tatters. They had underestimated humanity, and now they were paying the price. But there was no time for mourning, no time to dwell on what had been lost. A new plan had to be put into action, and fast. A new strategy must be devised to deal with the dreadnoughts and the humans who controlled them. The Zithari fleet had been humiliated, but they were not broken. Their technology was still beyond anything the humans had ever seen. Their tactics could still overwhelm. If only they could get close enough, if only they could find a way to outsmart the humans at their own game. The decision was made to send a specialized Zithari science vessel to study the wreckage of their failed strike force. The goal was simple: to recover anything that could provide insight into the dreadnoughts themselves, to understand their systems, their designs, their secrets. But they had learned nothing from the first encounter. No, they had learned that the humans were not interested in conventional war. They were something new. They fought with a kind of brilliance that made it impossible to predict their movements, impossible to understand their strategy. And so the Zithari scientists moved forward with their plan, knowing they were treading on dangerous ground. The science vessel arrived at the debris field and began its scan. The wreckage of their ships floated lifelessly in the cold void. The metal twisted and burned. The remnants of failed weapon systems scattered like broken bones across the cold blackness. As the scientists worked, their machines hummed and buzzed, but their results were just as disturbing as the battle itself. The readings fluctuated wildly, as if the wreckage itself was still alive, still reacting to the presence of the Zithari ship. It was an unsettling sensation, like they were being watched. No, nothing so far, but their systems were still glitching, their sensors still out of alignment. With no clear explanation, they couldn't pinpoint it. But something was wrong. Something was deeply wrong with the way the dreadnoughts had fought. And now something was wrong with their remains as well. The captain of the science vessel ordered the crew to be more careful. They needed answers, not more questions. But the more they scanned, the more they encountered strange inconsistencies, signals that should not exist, energy readings that shouldn't be there. The dreadnoughts had hidden their true nature even in death. Their wreckage was a puzzle, and the puzzle had no answers. It was as if the ships themselves were defying the laws of physics and reason again. But the captain refused to stop. He knew there was something here that could turn the tide, something that could give them the edge against the humans. But the deeper they went into the wreckage, the more the unease grew. And then the unthinkable happened. As the crew continued to scan the broken ships, the scanners began to flare with a new intensity, an intensity that none of them had ever seen before. The data surged beyond their control, the computers froze, and then the readings went completely dark. The ship's systems went silent. Then the captain felt it, the same sensation from before, a presence, a force, something older and far more dangerous than any enemy they had ever faced. It was like the wreckage was alive with a mind of its own, a mind that was watching them, studying them. And as they turned their sensors back toward the science vessel, the ship's computers blared one final warning, a message flashing on every screen. Do not engage. The HFY science vessel drifted helplessly in the void, its crew paralyzed by the sudden eruption of chaos. The systems flickered on, and off, lights buzzed, and then went dark entirely. The ship was adrift. But its crew was not alone. The silence of space had been broken. The hum of an unseen presence filled every corner of the ship, its weight pressing down on them like a crushing force. No one could explain it, no one could understand it, but it was real. They could feel it in the air. The ship felt smaller now, as if the vastness of space had been swallowed up by something far greater, something that was watching them. Every HFY officer turned their eyes to the screen. The captain's hands shook as they gripped the control panel, trying to bring the ship back to life. But there was no response, no systems, no propulsion. The crew was powerless, and they knew it. Their desperation grew, but so did their fear. They had no idea what they were up against, and in the darkest part of their minds, they wondered if they ever would. The dreadnoughts were not just ships. They had learned that much. They were alive. Somehow they had evolved beyond mere metal and circuitry. They were as unpredictable as the humans themselves. And yet there was something more, something even more terrifying than the ships themselves. The humans had built these ships, but the ships were not just vessels of war. They were the embodiment of human intelligence and cunning, and that intelligence had a life of its own now. It had begun to think and adapt on its own terms. The captain barked orders to the crew, but no one moved. No one could move. The wreckage around them began to hum, its energies fluctuating, the silent voice of the ship's mind resonating through the metal as if it were speaking to them. They had tried to scan it before, but now it felt different. It felt alive, like it was responding to their presence, to their fear. The HFY ship was completely at the mercy of the dreadnought's will, and they had no control. Nothing could stop it from doing what it wanted. The captain screamed orders again, desperation filling their voice. But it was useless. Nothing could be done. And then it happened. A signal cracked through the silence on the captain's console, a warning message flashing urgently. Do not stand, do not approach. But it was too late. The dreadnoughts had already begun to react, its systems slowly coming back to life, as if it had been waiting for this moment, waiting for the HFY to make their move. It was the moment they had feared, the moment they had prepared for. The ship's sensors lit up. The dreadnought was no longer passive. It had been watching them this entire time, studying them as they had studied it. Now it would do what it had been designed to do. Now it would strike back. The HFY crew watched in horror as the systems around them came alive with a violent surge of energy. Their own weapons turned against them, as if the ship had learned to use them better than they ever could. The power systems went into overdrive, and the shields failed. The crew screamed as the ship's engines began to tear themselves apart, unable to contain the force that had been unleashed. The HFY had no defense, no countermeasure for the sheer adaptability of the dreadnoughts as it turned their own technology against them. They were not just dealing with a machine, they were dealing with a mind, something far beyond their comprehension, something that had been built to outthink them at every turn. The science vessel exploded into fragments, its remains scattered across the void as the dreadnought faded back into the darkness, just as it had arrived, leaving nothing but the echoes of its wrath in the silence of space. The galaxy trembled with fear as the news of the Zithari fleet's destruction spread like wildfire. Whispers of the dreadnoughts spread across every corner of known space, and with it came the dawning realization that humanity was no longer a primitive species to be ignored. The dreadnoughts were not just powerful warships, they were symbols of something far greater, something terrifying. They were proof that humanity had learned to wield war in a way no one else could, and now the entire galaxy was faced with the consequences. Other alien species who had once dismissed humanity as insignificant now saw them as a threat that could not be ignored. The Zithari had failed, but they were not the only ones watching. Others who had once been content to watch from the sidelines now began to stir. The Voltar, a race of massive insectoid creatures known for their brute strength and vicious strategies, made contact with the Zithari remnants, their words cold and full of disdain. Humanity was a threat they would not ignore. The Silrak, a highly intelligent race of aquatic beings that controlled vast portions of galactic trade networks, began to mobilize their fleets. The Vasari, a technologically advanced race with ships that could phase in and out of reality itself, began to send scouts into human territory, all of them driven by the same terrifying realization: they had been too late to stop humanity. And now humanity's warships had become an unstoppable force. The Zithari had already paid the price for underestimating humanity, but the rest of the galaxy was not yet ready to accept the truth. Humanity would not be defeated by force alone. No, the dreadnoughts had shown the galaxy that intelligence could trump anything else, that humanity had something none of them had anticipated, a kind of creativity that was always one step ahead of its enemies. And now the galaxy would have to face it. They would have to face the fact that the greatest weapon humanity possessed was not its technology or its warships, but its minds that could create and adapt faster than any species could ever predict. As the fleets of the alien races began to assemble and prepare for battle against humanity, whispers of a new strategy began to form in the dark corners of the galaxy. The smartest among the alien leaders knew that there was only one way to defeat humanity, one way to ensure that the dreadnoughts could be stopped. They had to outthink them. They had to become more unpredictable, more chaotic than humanity could ever be. It was no longer about overwhelming firepower or brute strength. It was about beating the human mind at its own game. And so the galaxy's greatest military powers began to form a secret alliance, each of them bringing their own strengths to the table. They knew that the dreadnoughts would not fall to conventional tactics. No, their minds would have to be matched with a strategy even more unpredictable, more chaotic than anything humanity had ever seen. But even as they made their plans, they could not shake the creeping fear that no matter how they tried to outsmart humanity, they would never be able to beat the very thing that made humanity so dangerous in the first place: its ability to think differently, to fight when everyone else had given up, to adapt when no one else could. And in the deepest reaches of space, those who had come together to fight humanity began to realize the most terrifying truth of all: they were not fighting dreadnoughts, they were fighting the human spirit. And that was a battle no one could win. The alliance of alien forces met in secret, their fleets preparing in the dark reaches of space. The Voltar, with their monstrous warships, their brutal strength unmatched by anything in the galaxy. The Silrak, with their incredible intellect and vast resources that controlled the very currents of interstellar trade. The Vasari, with their ability to phase between dimensions, bending space itself to their will. Each race brought something different to the table. Each believed they could outsmart humanity and take down the dreadnoughts once and for all. But they were wrong. They were all wrong, and they didn't know it yet. They were so focused on their new strategies, their new plans, that they didn't see the one thing humanity had that they would never be able to beat: their refusal to ever give up, no matter the odds. The combined fleets moved through space like a massive tidal wave of destruction, their commanders hoping to catch humanity off guard, for once hoping to throw them off their game. But the humans were waiting. They always had been. The dreadnoughts were not hidden this time. They were there. They were watching silently. They had learned to read the stars and the minds of their enemies, and they saw the approach of the combined alien fleets long before the first shot was fired. The humans had prepared their own response to the coming storm. Their ships had already adapted. They were already making the necessary changes the alien fleets would never have expected. The Voltar had assumed that their overwhelming force would crush the humans in a single move, But they didn't understand humanity's strength. It was never about power. It was about being smarter and quicker than the enemy. The dreadnoughts cloaked again, this time their silence deafening. But this time, the aliens did not have the upper hand. The Vasari had assumed they could phase into reality and attack from all angles. But the humans had thought of that too. The dreadnoughts turned their systems on a frequency that interfered with the Vasari ability to phase, locking them into the very space they were trying to bend, trapping them in their own dimensional prison. The Silrak had hoped that their superior intellect and overwhelming numbers would overpower the human forces, but they hadn't considered the one truth they could never grasp. No amount of intellect or calculation could anticipate the human need to win, the human need to fight, even when everything seemed impossible. They thought they could outthink the humans. But the humans had no pattern to follow. Their unpredictability was a force they could never match. They tried to predict the humans' next move, but the humans weren't fighting according to plan. The dreadnoughts adapted on the fly, reshaping their tactics in real time, adjusting to every movement of the alien fleets. Dreadnoughts weren't just ships, they were expressions of human thought and willpower. They didn't follow rules, they made them up as they went. And that was something the alien fleets could never predict. A Vulture battle cruiser charged forward, unleashing its full arsenal on one of the dreadnoughts, only to watch in horror as the ship split in two before their very eyes. The ship reformed in real time, the energy deflecting off its hull like liquid, the alien ship's weaponry useless against its shifting form, as the dreadnought countered with a precise attack that sent the cruiser spinning off into deep space. The Silrak retaliated with a barrage of plasma fire, but it was already too late. The dreadnoughts had already mapped their movements before they even began, and they had already countered each attack before it was made. The battle stretched out across the stars, a chaotic symphony of alien fire and human ingenuity. But in the end, it was clear who was winning. The dreadnoughts were not only surviving, they were thriving. They had adapted to every alien attack and destroyed every offensive before it could land. The combined alien forces had underestimated humanity, and they were paying for it now. Their fleets broken, their plans shattered. The Zithari, their former allies, had fled in terror, realizing that no strategy would ever be enough to overcome the human spirit and the dreadnoughts that embodied it. The final truth was becoming clear to the galaxy. Humanity was not just a force to be reckoned with. They were the future of war, and no alien race would ever defeat them again. Not because of their technology, not because of their ships, but because of the one thing that no other species could ever replicate: their mind, their will, their determination to always win no matter what. In the aftermath of the battle, the stars were eerily quiet. The dreadnoughts drifted through space victorious, their forms shimmering like silent ghosts against the backdrop of a broken galaxy. The combined alien fleets had been scattered, and their forces had been shattered. The once proud invaders had been humbled by the very species they had underestimated for so long. The humans did not celebrate the victory. No, they never did. The fight was never about triumph for them. It was about survival, about proving that they would always find a way to adapt no matter what faced them. And as the dreadnoughts sailed through the endless void, their mission was far from over. The galaxy was vast, and while the alien fleets had been crushed, others would rise to take their place. There were still those out there who would not believe what had happened, those who would still think that humanity was just a passing phase or a mistake waiting to be corrected. But the humans had learned long ago that it was the mind that truly mattered, and they had developed a way of thinking that no enemy could overcome. The dreadnoughts had been designed to protect, but they were more than that. They were a statement, they were a symbol to the galaxy that humanity would never be silenced. They would never be conquered. Their enemies would always meet a force they could not understand, a force that would always outthink them and outfight them, no matter the odds. And as the humans turned their gaze back to the stars, they knew one thing for certain: their victory had not been a fluke. It was a testament to their unyielding spirit, to their unbreakable will to survive in a universe that would rather see them gone. And so the dreadnoughts sailed silently through the void, always adapting, always changing, always ready for the next battle, because that was what humanity did. They fought, and they won. And they never stopped, no matter how many times the galaxy tried to crush them. No matter how many times they were told they were nothing, no matter how many times they were told they would fail, they never failed. and they never would. The galaxy would soon learn that the dreadnoughts were not the end of humanity's rise, but only the beginning. The universe would be forced to acknowledge humanity as its equal, but it would never be ready for the way they would reshape everything. No one could predict humanity's next move, and that uncertainty was what made them so dangerous. Their minds would lead them into every corner of the galaxy and beyond. No alien race could ever escape the fact that humanity had already won, and they hadn't even realized it yet, because the humans weren't just playing the game of war, they were changing it. And every species in the galaxy was about to see how humans would redefine what it meant to be a force of nature. No matter how many times they tried to fight back, humanity would always find a way to stay one step ahead, and that was the real terror, because the dreadnoughts were only the beginning of a much greater truth. Humanity would not just survive, they would rule.